Rain had been falling over Chicago since sunrise. Not the violent kind that flooded streets, just a cold, steady rain that slowly found its way through old clothes and tired bones. Samuel Carter sat beneath a faded bus stop shelter across from the Grand Windsor Hotel. His backpack rested beside him. Inside it were all the possessions he still owned: two shirts, an old military blanket, a flashlight that barely worked, a photograph wrapped carefully inside a plastic bag, and a bronze military medal he hadn't shown another person in nearly 30 years. To everyone walking past, he was simply another homeless old man, invisible. People hurried by with umbrellas and expensive coffee. Some avoided looking at him. Others looked only long enough to judge him. Samuel had grown used to both. At 72 years old, disappointment no longer surprised him. He quietly opened the plastic bag and looked at the photograph. The edges were worn white from decades of being unfolded. It showed 6 young soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder, covered in mud, smiling despite the exhaustion in their faces. 5 of them never came home. Samuel was the only survivor. Every Friday morning, he visited the same place, the Grand Windsor Hotel, not because he wanted luxury, because someone had once promised to meet him there, 30 years ago, a promise that had never been kept. Most people would have forgotten. Samuel never did. A promise made between soldiers was never just a promise. It was a duty. A black limousine slowly stopped in front of the hotel. Reporters immediately rushed toward the entrance. Cameras flashed nonstop. "Mr. Whitmore." "Sir, one picture." "How do you feel about today's charity gala?" A tall man stepped from the limousine. His tailored suit probably cost more than Samuel had owned in his entire life. His silver watch caught the morning light. His shoes never touched a puddle. People moved aside without being asked. Edward Whitmore, founder of Whitmore Technologies, one of the richest men in America. Television called him a business genius. Magazines called him self-made. Employees called him demanding. Samuel simply watched in silence. He had seen powerful men before. During the war, money had never frightened him. Bullets had. Edward stopped halfway to the hotel entrance. His eyes landed on Samuel. Only for a second. Then he looked away. "Why are homeless people allowed to sit in front of my event?" he asked one of the hotel managers. His voice wasn't angry. It was worse. It was dismissive. The manager immediately signaled security. 2 guards began walking toward Samuel. One sighed, the other forced a polite smile. "Sir, we're going to have to ask you to move." Samuel slowly stood. "I understand." He reached for his backpack. He had heard those words hundreds of times. Nobody wanted homeless people near luxury hotels. He never argued. He simply left. As he turned away, something slipped from his backpack. The old photograph landed on the wet sidewalk. One of the guards bent down to pick it up. Before he could, a young woman hurried forward. Careful. She gently lifted the photograph before the rain soaked it. "I'm sorry." She carefully brushed the water away using her sleeve. Samuel looked surprised. Most people stepped over his belongings. She protected them. "You dropped this." Her name tag read, Emily. She worked inside the hotel restaurant. Probably no older than 26, she smiled kindly. "This looks important." Samuel carefully accepted the photograph. "It is." She looked at the 6 young soldiers. "Were they your friends?" Samuel nodded. "My brothers." Emily noticed something unusual. On Samuel's faded jacket, pinned carefully above his heart, was a tiny bronze pin. Not decorative. Military. She had seen one exactly like it before. Her grandfather owned one. "Did you serve?" Samuel smiled softly. "A long time ago." Before Emily could ask another question, a sharp voice interrupted. "Emily." The restaurant manager stormed outside. "What are you doing?" She stood quickly. "I was just helping." "I didn't ask." He lowered his voice. "Our guests are arriving." "Get inside. Now." Emily looked back at Samuel. "I'm sorry." Samuel gave a small nod. "You've done nothing wrong." She hesitated, then quietly slipped something into his hand before returning inside. It was a meal voucher, good for breakfast. She had paid for it herself. Samuel stared at it for several seconds. No one had bought him breakfast in months. Inside the ballroom, Edward Whitmore was preparing to address nearly 500 business leaders. The annual Veterans Charity Gala. Millions of dollars would be pledged. Television crews broadcast every speech live. Banners filled the stage. Supporting America's heroes. Samuel looked through the large glass windows. He almost laughed. People inside would spend thousands talking about veterans. Outside, nobody wanted one standing near the entrance. He folded the breakfast voucher and slipped it into his pocket. Then he quietly walked toward a nearby park. He preferred eating alone. Less embarrassing that way. As Samuel disappeared around the corner, Emily watched from the restaurant window. Something about him bothered her. Not in a bad way. In a familiar way. She couldn't explain it. During her lunch break, she called her grandfather. "Elliot?" The old man answered after 3 rings. "Everything okay, sweetheart? I met someone today." "Oh?" "An elderly, homeless veteran." There was silence. Then she added, "He wore an old Bronze Ranger pin." Another silence. Longer this time. "What did he look like?" Emily described him. Gray beard, blue eyes, a scar across his left eyebrow. Walked with a slight limp. The old man's breathing changed. "Emily, did he have a photograph?" "Yes." 6 soldiers. The phone became completely silent. Finally, her grandfather spoke in almost a whisper. "Did you ask his name?" "No." His voice trembled. I think you may have just met the man who saved my life." Emily froze. What? 38 years earlier, Elliot Turner had been 22 years old, terrified, wounded, trapped behind enemy lines. His commanding officer refused to leave anyone behind. That officer carried Elliot nearly 3 miles through enemy fire, then disappeared before anyone could properly thank him. For decades, Elliot searched every military reunion, every veterans organization, every public record. The hero who saved his life had vanished. No address, no family, nothing. Only one name remained in his memory. Captain Samuel Carter. Emily's heart pounded. "You really think it's him?" "I'd know that description anywhere." She looked through the restaurant window toward the empty sidewalk. Samuel was already gone. "Grandpa, what if I never see him again?" "You will," the old man answered confidently. "Heroes have a strange way of appearing exactly when they are needed." Emily hung up slowly. Across town, Samuel sat alone on a park bench eating the warm breakfast sandwich Emily had bought. He smiled after the first bite, not because of the food, because someone had treated him like he still mattered. He hadn't felt that in years. As he finished eating, a black SUV quietly pulled to the curb. A man wearing an expensive suit stepped out. He wasn't smiling. "Captain Samuel Carter?" Samuel looked up slowly. "I haven't heard that name in a very long time." The man removed his sunglasses. "My employer has been searching for you." Samuel frowned. "For me?" "Yes." He says, "It's finally time to keep a promise made 30 years ago." Samuel's eyes widened. Only one person had ever made him that promise. And according to every official report, that man had died decades ago. Samuel slowly stood from the park bench. The young man in the expensive suit didn't move. He simply waited. People walked past without paying attention. To them, it looked like a businessman speaking to another stranger. But Samuel's heart was racing. "Who sent you?" he asked quietly. The man reached into his jacket and removed a cream-colored envelope. On the front, written in elegant handwriting, were just 3 words. For Samuel Carter. Samuel's hands trembled as he accepted it. He hadn't received a personal letter in years. Inside was a single note. "If you're reading this, then I finally found you. Please come with the driver. There are things you deserve to know." There was no signature, only a familiar military symbol drawn in blue ink. Samuel stared at it. His breathing became uneven. "I know that symbol." The young man nodded. "My employer hoped you would." Samuel looked toward the black SUV. For a long moment, he considered walking away. Life had taught him that unexpected kindness often came with hidden motives, but something inside him whispered, "Go." He climbed into the vehicle. Meanwhile, back at the Grand Windsor Hotel, Edward Whitmore had just finished his charity speech. The audience stood and applauded. "We must never forget the sacrifices of our veterans," Edward declared proudly. Cameras flashed. Reporters praised his generosity. A standing ovation echoed through the ballroom. Emily watched from the side entrance. She couldn't stop thinking about Samuel. The speech sounded beautiful, yet only an hour earlier. The same man had ordered security to remove an elderly veteran from the front of the hotel. Something about it didn't feel right. The SUV drove nearly 40 minutes through downtown Chicago. Finally, it stopped outside an old brick mansion surrounded by towering oak trees. Samuel stepped out slowly. The property looked less like a mansion and more like a private museum. Military flags lined the walkway. Bronze statues honored fallen soldiers. Inside, the walls were covered with photographs of veterans from different wars, some smiling, some never returned home. Samuel looked around in silence. Every face reminded him of someone he had lost. An elderly woman approached him. She wore a navy blue suit. Her silver hair was neatly tied back. "Captain Carter," she smiled gently. "My name is Margaret Collins. I've been waiting a very long time to meet you." Samuel frowned. "Do I know you?" "No, but my husband did." She led him into a quiet library. An old wooden desk stood near the window. On top rested a faded military journal. Beside it, another photograph, the exact same photograph Samuel carried. Only this copy had been carefully preserved. Samuel picked it up. His eyes widened. Written on the back were 6 signatures, including his own. The last signature belonged to a man named Michael Collins. Samuel slowly closed his eyes. "I buried Michael." Margaret nodded. "So everyone believed." Samuel looked at her in confusion. "What do you mean?" Tears filled her eyes. "My husband survived." The room became completely silent. Samuel couldn't speak. "It wasn't public," Margaret continued. "The government classified the rescue mission. Michael spent years recovering from his injuries. He wanted to find you. He searched every veterans organization in the country. But you disappeared." Samuel looked down. "I wasn't hiding. I just stopped living." After returning from the war, Samuel had lost everything. Nightmares stole his sleep. Depression stole his future. His marriage fell apart. His daughter died in a car accident while he was working overseas. Eventually, he stopped answering phone calls, stopped attending reunions, stopped believing anyone remembered him. Margaret gently placed a small wooden box on the table. "Michael passed away last winter. He asked me to find one person before I did anything else. You." Samuel stared silently at the box. Inside rested an old military watch. Its glass was cracked, its leather strap badly worn. Samuel recognized it immediately. He had given it to Michael moments before their final mission. "You kept it?" Margaret smiled through tears. "He never took it off." Samuel couldn't stop the tears any longer. For the first time in years, he cried openly, not because of pain, but because someone had remembered. Someone had spent decades searching for him. After several quiet minutes, Margaret handed him another envelope. "This one is from Michael. He wrote it 6 months before he passed." Samuel unfolded the letter carefully. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakably Michael's. "Sam, if you're reading this, then I'm sorry I couldn't thank you face to face. You carried me when no one else could. You gave me a future. Everything I built afterward exists because of your courage. My wife, my children, my grandchildren. Every birthday I celebrated belonged to you first. Promise me one thing. Stop believing the world forgot you. Because I never did. And neither will my family." Samuel lowered the letter. His hands shook uncontrollably. Margaret quietly wiped away her own tears. "My husband became successful after the war. He started a small manufacturing company. That company eventually grew into Collins Defense Systems." Samuel looked confused. "I've heard of them." She nodded. "Last year we sold the company. For nearly $800 million. Samuel blinked. The number meant nothing to him. He had spent the last decade wondering where his next meal would come from. Money no longer impressed him. Then Margaret said something that completely changed the room. "My husband left specific instructions." She slid one final document across the desk. It was a legal letter, signed, notarized, official. Samuel read the first line. "To Captain Samuel Carter." His breathing stopped. The document stated that Michael Collins had created a Veterans Foundation years earlier, a foundation dedicated to helping homeless veterans rebuild their lives. But there was one condition. Only Samuel Carter could become its chairman. Samuel looked up. "There must be some mistake." Margaret smiled warmly. "No mistake. My husband trusted only one person to protect veterans. You." Samuel slowly shook his head. "I sleep in shelters. I don't even own a house. You don't need wealth to lead. She answered softly, "You only need character." Before Samuel could respond, a television mounted on the library wall suddenly switched to breaking news. A reporter stood outside the Grand Windsor Hotel. "Today's Veterans Charity Gala has raised nearly $20 million. Samuel looked away. Margaret didn't. Then the reporter continued. The event was hosted by billionaire Edward Whitmore. Margaret's expression changed instantly. Edward Whitmore. Samuel noticed. You know him? She nodded slowly. Unfortunately, I know him very well. The room grew quiet. Then she whispered words that Samuel never expected to hear. The fortune Edward Whitmore built started with an idea that belonged to Michael. Samuel looked up in disbelief. What are you saying? Margaret took a deep breath. I'm saying the man who humiliated you this morning owes everything he has to the soldier whose life you saved. Samuel stared at her in complete silence. For the second time that day, his entire world changed.